Let's get a divorce. Staring at the divorce papers on the coffee table, Quach Phuong remained motionless. Whether it was calmness before the storm or a pain so intense that it paralyzed her limbs, only she knew. Tan Duat, I'm pregnant. Quach Phuong suddenly raised her head to look at him. Her dove-like eyes curved as if she was very happy to announce the good news, ignoring the other man's coldness towards her. Tan Duat furrowed his brows, clearly very unhappy with the idea of her being pregnant. He asked in an icy tone, I told you to take birth control pills and you didn't take them? Quach Phuong smiled. It's my body. I have the right to decide. Tan Duat suddenly found her smile extremely dazzling and replied discontentedly, Quach Phuong, have you forgotten what our agreement was when we got married? 3 years ago, I agreed to marry you because it was my grandfather's wish. Now that he's gone and Nhan has returned, I no longer have any reason to continue this marriage. We should get a divorce. How could Quach Phuong not know who Nhan was? Not only did she know, but she also knew very well. Nhan was Tan Duat's first love and the love of his life. There was also a complicated connection between Quach Phuong and Nhan. Years ago, 2 babies were born on the same day, but a nurse had accidentally swapped them, leading to an exchange of identities. It wasn't until 18 years later that this was discovered. Quach Phuong was originally the highborn daughter of the Ngo family, but she had become an orphan. Nhan had taken her identity for over 18 years, and even won the love that should have been hers. In this race of fate, Quach Phuong had lost miserably. Sometimes she even deeply resented Nhan. If it weren't for her, if she had been able to live her true identity, would she have been Tan Duat's childhood sweetheart? Would he have loved her? The more Quach Phuong thought about it, the more bitter she felt. She bit her lip and lowered her head. What about the baby? Tan Duat remained silent, but then answered a moment later. Get rid of it. Even though she already knew the answer early on, Quach Phuong still felt pain, heart-wrenching pain. Under her stomach, every pang of agony was transmitted. She didn't know whether it was because the child inside her could feel its father's indifference, or if it was because of the cruel disease ravaging inside of her. Perhaps even both. Quach Phuong tried to hold back her tears and heard her voice tremble. Tan Duat, from beginning to end, you never had any feelings for me? Tan Duat was slightly stunned, not expecting Quach Phuong to ask him such a question. However, he felt that she was only intentionally trying to prolong the divorce proceedings. Never. The only person I love is Nhan. Don't do pointless things anymore. Tan Duat took his coat and stood up. I have to go pick Nhan up. Take your time to sign the divorce papers. I won't let you leave with nothing, so whatever you need, I'll leave to you. If you have any other requests, just wait until I come back, then we can talk. Looking at Tan Duat's fading figure, Quach Phuong's tears finally fell. She bit her lip until it bled, whispering to herself, Tan Duat, I understand. It turned out that not loving simply meant not loving. No matter how much Quach Phuong sacrificed or loved him, it still wouldn't change his mind. She only told him that she was pregnant, but did not tell him she had late-stage cervical cancer. If she wanted treatment, she would have to get an abortion, which was exactly what Tan Duat had wanted. Quach Phuong pulled the divorce papers on the table closer and read all the terms from start to finish. Then, decisively, she signed the divorce papers. 7 years of unrequited love and 3 years of marriage had been enough to break Quach Phuong's heart. Her body was no longer able to endure this foolish love. If she were to undergo treatment now, she could only hope to live for another 5 years at most. But with her weak body, she feared that even 3 years might be out of reach. Putting the divorce papers in her bag, Quach Phuong wiped her tears and took a car to the hospital. The abortion surgery proceeded very quickly, taking only about 20 minutes, and she hadn't even felt any pain. But she knew there was no physical pain comparable to the agony of having to kill her own child. That was her baby. It hadn't even taken shape yet. Quach Phuong hurriedly left the hospital room. She didn't want to stay here for another second. She felt very scared and struggling to breathe. Along the hospital corridor, onlookers witnessed a young, delicate woman walking while crying. Her sobs made others feel uncomfortable, yet sorry for her. Quach Phuong kept going in one direction and was in no mood to pay attention to others. Right at that moment, a male doctor had stopped in front of her. Quach Phuong was caught off guard and bumped into him, her tears and snot sticking to his white blouse. She apologized profusely, her voice choked up. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. Are you okay?" She only saw the young doctor lower his head, reaching out to wipe her tears. He jokingly said, "Quach Phuong, I haven't seen you for 3 years, and you're still as pathetic as the first day we met." It was past 11 o'clock at night when Tan Duat returned home. He thought Quach Phuong would be asleep by now. But unexpectedly, just like any other day, she still stayed up all night, waiting for him to return. The dining room light was brightly lit, and she was sitting upright in front of the prepared dining table, unaware of how long she had been there. Quach Phuong heard the noise and turned her head to look past the entrance. Seeing Tan Duat, a smile involuntarily appeared on her lips. The corner of her lips suddenly lifted into a smile. "You're back?" Quach Phuong stepped forward to take off his coat for him, but Tan Duan didn't hesitate to stop her and hung up his coat on the coat rack by himself. Her smile seemed somewhat unnatural. "What's wrong? Normally, I always help you hang up your coat, don't I?" "Quach Phuong, our situation is now different from before. Don't make me feel even more disgusted." Tan Duat frowned and walked past her. Quach Phuong silently lowered her head, clutching the hem of her dress tightly. She thought that the past 3 years of love between husband and wife could move him, but when Nhan Tin returned, everything had become meaningless. Later, when Tan Duat had married her, he said his favorite dish was red bean buns. But she knew Tan Duat didn't like anything related to beans. He only liked them because Nhan Tin did. Even though Quach Phuong clearly knew this, she still diligently learned how to make red bean buns, becoming so skilled that even her friends had advised her to open a shop. However, Tan Duat only tasted them once and then told her not to make them again. Later on, she discovered that every time Tan Duat got off work, he would buy red bean buns from the same shop, even once sitting in the car with tears streaming down his face as he ate. In that moment, she knew that no matter how much she changed for him in this life, she could never replace Nhan Tin's place in his heart. Love was foolish like that. Clinging on to someone who didn't love you was like embracing a cactus. The more you hold on to it, the more painful it becomes. There will be a lot of blood, but just for the chance of having their gaze turned towards you once was worth 1,000 arrows through the heart. Tan Duat finished his shower and stepped out only to find Quach Phuong sitting quietly at the dining table. She then spoke again. "Tan Duat, let's eat." Tan Duat decided to change the topic. "Have you signed the divorce papers yet?" Quach Phuong forced a smile. "Can we talk after eating, please? I'm too hungry." Tan Duat stepped forward and angrily knocked over the tray of rice on the table. The hot soup splashed onto her legs, causing a burning sensation that made her curl her toes in pain. She had reheated this meal 15 times already, so it should be fine now. There was no need to reheat it anymore. "What tricks are you trying to play now, Quach Phuong? Do you want the position of Mrs. Tan that badly, to the point of going crazy? The person I want to marry has never been you, do you understand?" Tan Duat angrily shouted at her. His temples were full of blue veins, clearly frustrated with her antics. Quach Phuong bent down, carefully gathering the broken pieces together, and calmly replied, "I have signed the divorce papers, but I have one condition." "What condition?" Tan Duat furrowed his brow and asked. Quach Phuong didn't raise her head, answering in the same manner, "Let's become a true couple for 7 days." Waiting until the emotions in her heart had settled and making sure that her tears would not fall, she raised her head to look at him, her dove-like eyes stirring emotions. "Just 7 days, it isn't that difficult, right, Mr. Tan?" Tan Duat looked at her thoughtfully, wanting to refuse. However, upon reconsideration and feeling curious about what she was up to, he reluctantly agreed to her request. "Fine. Thank you." Quach Phuong walked to the kitchen sink to wash her hands. While washing, she said, "As per your wish, I've had an abortion. After marrying Nhan Tin, you don't have to worry. I won't bring the child to look for you and demand responsibility." Her demeanor was neither salty nor bland, akin to casually talking about how nice the weather was today. telling him that there was no need to bring an umbrella. Tan Duat sneered. You're really quite opportunistic. He had thought Quach Phuong would fight tooth and nail to keep this child. Turns out she didn't love him as much as he had thought. Hadn't she grown up in poverty since childhood? So her initial love for him was merely because he was the heir of the Tan family. The woman was clearly only after status and wealth. Fate was truly mocking. A good girl like Nan Ting should be the rightful lady of the Ngo family. If it weren't for Quach Phuong, why wouldn't Nan Ting dare to face her foster parents and the pressure from his grandfather, but chose to leave abroad? Tan Duat naturally shifted all responsibility onto Quach Phuong's head. You go to bed first, I'll tidy up for a bit, then join you later. Hearing this, Tan Duat didn't bother saying much more to her and calmly returned to the bedroom. Once Tan Duat's figure disappeared up the stairs, Quach Phuong hurriedly ran to the bathroom, hugging the toilet bowl as she vomited. She hadn't eaten anything all day, and what came out was just bile. The wave of nausea choked her chest, and the cramping pain in her lower abdomen made her feel exhausted, as if she could die at any moment. Quach Phuong leaned against the toilet bowl, breathing heavily. No matter what, she had to try a little harder. She had promised Cao Vien Tan that she would be hospitalized for treatment next week. She couldn't go back on her word to him. This morning, Quach Phuong didn't expect the person she bumped into would be Cao Vien Tan. While they weren't exactly strangers, they weren't close either. They could be considered acquaintances, but not particularly close friends. The both of them grew up in the same orphanage. Her impression of Cao Vien Tan back then was that he was eccentric and difficult to approach. He was always alone. Even the foster mother back at the orphanage couldn't hold a conversation with him for more than 5 sentences. The first time Quach Phuong and Cao Vien Tan met was when she was being bullied by the other kids in her room. Cao Vien Tan had appeared out of nowhere, rescuing her, and beat those children to a pulp. One detail she remembered very clearly was that Cao Vien Tan's venomous tongue was comparable to the poison of a pufferfish. As the children lay moaning on the floor, Cao Vien Tan stood tall and looked at them with disdain in his eyes and said, "We were all abandoned by our parents. What makes you think you're superior?" After that fight, they were all lectured for a while and were also punished with cleaning duties. Thanks to that, she realized that Cao Vien Tan wasn't as unapproachable as she thought. Coincidentally, during their school years, Quach Phuong and Cao Vien Tan both attended the same school. It was July. One step forward was autumn, one step back was summer. Underfoot, there lingered a faint smell of wet mud from last night's heavy rain. Quach Phuong sat on a stone bench under an almond tree outside the hospital. She reached out to take the glass of hot milk from Cao Vien Tan. "Thank you." Cao Vien Tan silently stuffed a tissue into her hand, the corner of his lips curled up. "No need to thank me. I was afraid Miss Ngo might stir up trouble again and make the hospital director come out to appease her personally. So I sacrificed myself." Quach Phuong couldn't help but burst into laughter, her eyes still warm and moist. "After 3 years, you're still as unpleasant as ever." Pausing for a moment, she reminded him, "Call me Quach Phuong." "Oh, classmate Quach Phuong knows how to flatter." Cao Vien Tan took a sip of coffee and casually asked, "Did you find out you had an incurable disease or something, to be crying so fiercely?" Quach Phuong savored the warmth of the hot milk in her hand, letting the heat seep into her body. If the person standing in front of her were her parents or Tan Duat, she would have definitely kept this matter a secret. But facing Cao Vien Tan, for some reason, she felt relieved, as if she could tell him everything regardless of the consequences. Perhaps deep down, she truly saw Cao Vien Tan as someone capable of confronting this harsh world. Quach Phuong's voice was as gentle as the early spring breeze. "It's true that nothing can get past you." Quach Phuong smiled softly. "I have late-stage cervical cancer." Cao Vien Tan was stunned, his pupils shrank in shock. He quickly hid his trembling hands in the pockets of his blouse and reprimanded her in a scolding tone. "This brat, do you even realize how bad your joking skills are? Even a child could tell you're lying." "Vien Tan, I'm not lying. It's true." Quach Phuong looked at him seriously, her dove-like eyes now reflecting neither joy nor sorrow. Quach Phuong was always like that. She always treated what happened around her with indifference, yet she was also more resilient than anyone. Cao Vian Thanh vividly remembered the moment when Quach Phuong was beaten by those kids. She didn't cry or make a fuss. She had only bitten her lip tightly without letting out a single sound of pain. After all these years, he had always wondered whether Quach Phuong was incredibly strong or just incredibly good at enduring pain and being foolish. Then why haven't you admitted yourself to the hospital for treatment, you stupid kid? Cao Vian Thanh knelt down in front of her, bent his finger, and gently tapped Quach Phuong's forehead. Quach Phuong touched her head. Hey, we're both 26 now. You can't call me a kid anymore. Just accept it. Whoever is smarter is the older one. An idiot like you needs to get used to it. Remembering Cao Vian Thanh's extraordinary achievements back in school, Quach Phuong felt truly disappointed and had to admit defeat. Even though she had studied day and night, she was only able to rank second in the entire grade, right after Cao Vian Thanh. You smart, foul-mouthed guy. Before Quach Phuong could finish her sentence, Cao Vian Thanh interjected. Quach Phuong, even if you had only one day left to live, you must live. You have to live for me no matter how long. Cao Vian Thanh's tone was so serious that Quach Phuong didn't dare to joke around anymore. She nodded. I will get treatment, but not right now. Are you going to wait until you're lying in a coffin before you want treatment? It's not that bad. Just about a week, I promise. Quach Phuong looked at the clear sky. I want to settle everything first and then recover in peace. With that, Quach Phuong stood up and said goodbye to Cao Vian Thanh. She had to go home. Quach Phuong had just turned around when Cao Vian Thanh instinctively grabbed her hand and asked, Quach Phuong, have you been happy these past 3 years? She stood still and said, Vian Thanh, ever since I discovered I was seriously ill, I realized that simply being alive is a kind of happiness. Quach Phuong withdrew her hand from his grip and walked out of the hospital gate, slowly disappearing from Cao Vian Thanh's lingering gaze. Quach Phuong looked into the mirror. Her pupils reflected a haggard figure. She touched her face, feeling that her skin seemed drier, rougher, and noticeably duller lately. Quach Phuong frantically smeared skincare products all over her face. Suddenly, she clutched the toilet and vomited violently. Nearly an hour later, Quach Phuong dragged her body out of the bathroom, now changed into a comfortable nightgown. Opening the bedroom door, Quach Phuong saw Thanh Duat lying peacefully on the bed. The blanket had fallen to the floor. Thanh Duat had many bad habits, the first being that he often kicked the blanket off while sleeping. Quach Phuong quietly walked over, picked up the blanket, and carefully covered him with it. She found the air conditioner remote and adjusted the temperature a little bit higher. She had been doing these things for the past 3 years. It felt so familiar that even the position of the remote control never shifted an inch. Quach Phuong lay down beside Thanh Duat, facing his broad back. Suddenly, Thanh Duat turned around, and the man's handsome features appeared clearly in front of her eyes. Quach Phuong couldn't help but trace his features with her hand, as if trying to engrave the image into her head. Thanh Duat, if I die, I hope you could feel a little bit of sorrow for me. Life is truly too short to contain this love of mine. Once you have Nan Ting, you won't have to secretly eat red bean paste buns and cry, nor do you have to come home in the middle of the night to avoid someone you don't love. In just 7 days, your beautiful dream will come true. Outside the window, the first rays of sunlight shone into the room, illuminating Thanh Duat's face. He uncomfortably opened his eyes and habitually looked over to discover that Quach Phuong had long left the bed. For the past 3 years, Thanh Duat had always deliberately left early and came home late, rarely waking up at the same time as her. However, Thanh Duat didn't know that Quach Phuong had always been an early riser. From a young age, she would wake up early to do housework, and even when she went to school, she would work day and night to earn money for tuition and make ends meet. Quach Phuong would lie beside him with her eyes closed, waiting for him to leave the house so he wouldn't feel embarrassed. But today was different. She no longer needed to pretend. Quach Phuong wanted to live freely for once and to live life to the fullest. After Thanh Duat finished showering and getting dressed, he walked downstairs and was greeted by a delicious aroma wafting from the kitchen. This was soon followed by the sound of Quach Phuong's footsteps. "Let's have breakfast, Tan Duat." Quach Phuong waved a ladle back and forth. Her face lit up with a bright smile. Tan Duat was a bit dazed. He had to admit that Quach Phuong looked beautiful when she smiled. Her pink lips, white teeth, and the gentle curve of her dove-like eyes. However, the number of times he had seen her smile or shared a meal with her could be counted on one hand. Tan Duat nodded, walked over to the dining table, and sat down. Quach Phuong quickly brought over a hot cup of coffee and placed it in front of him. Tan Duat liked his coffee pure and was extremely particular about the brewing process. Every detail, from the sweetness, bitterness, acidity, and richness to the aroma, had to be just right. Quach Phuong had spent half a year learning how to brew coffee, timing it every morning to coincide with the moment he woke up, even calculating the exact temperature of the coffee. Sometimes she felt very funny. After 12 years of being a top student and receiving scholarships throughout her 4 years of university, she had ended up wasting all her energy catering to a man's preference. Tan Duat lifted the coffee cup and took a sip. The rich, perfectly balanced flavor spread through his mouth, and his eyebrows relaxed unconsciously. Quach Phuong secretly watched him, a small smile curling on her lips. However, her expression did not escape Tan Duat's sharp eyes. "What's so funny?" "No, nothing. I just feel very happy." Tan Duat glanced at her. "Happy about what?" Quach Phuong propped her chin up and placed a piece of fried egg in her mouth, her voice drifting. "I had put in so much effort. At least there's still a dish that suits your taste." "Tan Duat, you're really picky." "Really?" Tan Duat cleared his throat. He had a feeling that Quach Phuong was acting differently from usual. She usually spoke very little and never joked with him. Tan Duat felt a bit uneasy. The meal passed in an unusually harmonious manner. It was as if Tan Duat's outburst from the night before had never happened, as if they were just an ordinary married couple having breakfast and chatting together. As Tan Duat prepared to leave for work, Quach Phuong leisurely walked up to him and adjusted his tie. "You're already 26 years old. Why is your tie still tied so loosely?" Quach Phuong adjusted the knot to make it even and tight and fixed the length of the tie. Her hands were meticulous, and her eyes were incredibly focused. Tan Duat looked down. Quach Phuong's pale face was covered with a layer of makeup, but he could still see the dark circles under her eyelids. Regardless of love, Quach Phuong was truly the standard of a perfect housewife. Any man would want to marry a caring wife like her. But when it came to love, no ideal image held any significance. Quach Phuong smoothed out the folds of his shirt. "Done." Tan Duat suddenly felt uneasy under Quach Phuong's dove-like eyes and averted his gaze. "Then I'm off to work." "Wait," Quach Phuong called out as he turned to leave. He turned to look at her, losing patience. "Is there something else?" Quach Phuong tucked her bangs behind her ear and said carefully, "Come home a bit earlier today. Let's go watch a movie tonight." Tan Duat really wanted to laugh at Quach Phuong's strange request and was about to refuse when she spoke in a clear voice. "Yesterday, you agreed to my conditions. You wouldn't be the type to go back on your word, would you, Mr. Tan?" It was unclear if it was due to Quach Phuong's provocation or not, but his eyes darkened. Tan Duat curled his lips. "Of course, I'm not that kind of person. Watching a movie is no big deal. If you like it, then I'll indulge you." Quach Phuong smiled faintly. "Thank you." Tan Duat huffed irritably and left the house. The woman who always followed his every word and minimized her own existence, since when did she learn how to make demands with him? Quach Phuong was indeed very good at hiding her true self. After Tan Duat went to the company, Quach Phuong stayed home and tried on all the clothes in her wardrobe. She realized she had been rather stingy with herself. Just Tan Duat's shirts alone outnumbered her clothes by double. When she was a child living in an orphanage, Quach Phuong had gotten used to living frugally. Even after being taken in by the Ngo family, she didn't develop a habit of spending money. Any new clothes she had were all bought by Mrs. Ngo. Quach Phuong treated the clothes like treasure. She kept them stored carefully and did not dare to take them out to wear. But she forgot that these clothes were nothing compared to what Nantine had as the Ngo family's daughter for 18 years. When a person was used to living in hardship, Receiving a bit of charity would make you feel incredibly fortunate, not realizing that the luck you spent all your life hoping for was something others could have with just a snap of their fingers. Her gaze fell on a blue dress lying deep inside the closet. She curiously took it out and looked at it, then remembered that it was the dress she wore for her senior year graduation. The dress was knee-length, off-shoulder, with a border of blooming blue roses. It looked very much like Cinderella's dress from the fairy tale. With sparkling eyes, Quach Phuong went to the bathroom to try it on. Just as she reached the doorstep, she fell to her knees, clutching her stomach. The wave of pain suddenly hit Quach Phuong, who had no time to prepare, leaving her breathless. She clutched her stomach tightly, her face turned pale, and her temples were sweating like rain. Quach Phuong tried her best to crawl to the bedside table and pulled out the drawer to grab a bottle of painkillers. Her hand tensed, revealing the prominent bone joints. The medicine bottle was not held firmly enough and slipped out of her grasp. The lid fell off, and pills scattered everywhere. She couldn't afford to pay attention and directly picked the pills up from the floor, swallowing them without even having time to drink water. Quach Phuong leaned against the side of the bed and waited for the pain to subside. Each second and minute felt like torture, making her want to die. After a long while, she wobbled to her feet and slowly cleaned up the bedroom. Then she sat on the bed, holding her blue dress, and silently waited for Tan Duat to return. Waiting for someone was truly exhausting. Yet she had been waiting for Tan Duat for 10 years. However, these long tirings of waiting were gradually coming to an end. As promised, Tan Duat arrived home after work at 5 o'clock. As soon as he passed through the front entrance, he saw Quach Phuong waiting for him on the sofa, wearing a blue dress and intricate makeup. He vaguely recalled seeing her wear this dress before, but Tan Duat couldn't remember exactly when. In Tan Duat's impression, Quach Phuong had always dressed very plainly and never wore makeup. Compared to her classmates back then, Quach Phuong was like a lump of white powder, both pure and clean. It turned out that time could change a person that much. Quach Phuong took his coat and hung it up for him. This time, he didn't avoid her and had let her help him instead. His eyes, filled with disdain, roamed up and down her body. "What? Are you looking forward to watching a movie with me that much?" "That's right," Quach Phuong calmly replied, leaving Tan Duat momentarily speechless. A moment later, a low, displeased laugh reached her ears, revealing the irritation of its owner. Tan Duat grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up at him. "Quach Phuong, even though I agreed to become a proper couple with you for 7 days, I want you to remember that the person I love is Nan Tin. It always has been. So stop with these ridiculous, cheesy acts of yours." Quach Phuong's eyes were steadfast and unwavering. She smiled teasingly. "Mr. Tan, are you afraid that these cheesy acts of mine will make you fall in love with me? Dream on." Tan Duat left behind such a contemptuous remark before heading upstairs. Quach Phuong called after him. "Change your clothes quickly. The movie will start at 7 o'clock. Tan Duat didn't respond, but he walked a bit faster. Watching his retreating figure, Quach Phuong smiled bitterly. She then walked in front of the large mirror and inspected herself once more. Quach Phuong never thought that there would be a day when she and Tan Duat would have a real date. For the past 10 years, every day she had hoped that there would be a beautiful moment when Tan Duat would say to her, "Quach Phuong, I've suddenly realized how wonderful you are. I think I might like you." But now, she only wanted to use these 7 days to make him remember the most beautiful aspects of her. There was a fleeting thought that crossed Quach Phuong's mind, that if her death could haunt him for the rest of his life, even if he was with Nan Ting, he wouldn't be able to forget her. Just like how in their marriage, Tan Duat never forgot about Nan Ting. However, she didn't think that she was that kind of selfish person. She understood the rules of who came first and who came after very clearly. If it weren't for the pressure from Grandpa Tan, how could she have married Tan Duat? 3 years of tying him to her side with a marriage certificate was enough. It was time for her to return him to Nan Ting. About 10 minutes later, Tan Duat came downstairs. He was dressed casually in a t-shirt and trousers, exuding vitality. Quach Phuong couldn't help but remember the Tan Duat from their high school years. cold, arrogant, handsome, and charismatic. Quach Phuong did not hesitate to compliment him. Even though we're both 26 years old, I feel like I've aged a lot, but you're still so handsome. God is really unfair. Feeling awkward, Tan Duat walked past her, changing the subject. You talk too much. Are we going to watch the movie or not? Of course. Quach Phuong happily ran after him. She initially wanted to reach out and hug Tan Duat's arm, but ultimately retracted her hand and kept it by her side. Tan Duat rarely went to the cinema. If he did, he would have gone with Nhan Ting. He never expected that there would be a day when he would come to this place with Quach Phuong. While standing in line to buy tickets, Quach Phuong leaned in close to Tan Duat, speaking softly. Tan Duat, there are so many people here today. You should hold my hand. What if I get lost? Tan Duat replied in a low voice. Quach Phuong, I never knew you were so shameless. Fine. If you don't want to, then forget it. There's no need to be so harsh. Suddenly, a young man in the queue behind them pushed ahead, bumping into Quach Phuong's shoulder. Tan Duat frowned at him, and the young man quickly apologized. After a moment of consideration, Tan Duat decided to hold Quach Phuong's hand to prevent the delicate woman from being knocked over. Quach Phuong's hand wasn't as soft as other girls'. Her palms had many calluses. The calluses on her hand rubbed against his palm, making his heart feel itchy. Quach Phuong looked down, a small smile parting on her lips, her cheeks tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible layer of pink. When it was their turn to buy tickets, the staff member asked which movie they wanted to see. 2 tickets for I Want Us to Be Together at 7 o'clock, please. Please wait a moment. Tan Duat glanced at Quach Phuong, only able to see the top of her head. The movie choice seemed to carry a deeper meaning from this woman. After getting their tickets, Quach Phuong asked Tan Duat to buy popcorn and drinks. Watching a movie without these 2 things would feel incomplete. In the crowded place, Tan Duat found it a bit inconvenient to refuse. Moments ago, someone had claimed that she was afraid of getting lost without him, but now she was sending him off to buy popcorn and drinks for her. This woman truly wanted the world. At precisely 7 o'clock, Quach Phuong and Tan Duat took their places in the row of seats. She had chosen row 7 with the perfect view. As the screen was still showing an advertisement, Quach Phuong turned her head, cradling the bag of popcorn, and began to chatter nonstop. Today, I went online to see what movies were popular, and I Want Us to Be Together came up first. The male lead is Lucam Duong. I think the character's personality is somewhat similar to yours. Lucam Duong had devoted 3,650 days to loving Lang Nyat Nyo. As for Tan Duat, the rest of his life was very long. He will still have many cycles of 3,650 days to love Nhan Tin. But Quach Phuong only had 7 days. Tan Duat nonchalantly asked, "How so?" Quach Phuong's voice turned dreamy. In the movie, there's a scene where Lucam Duong gets thoroughly reprimanded for writing a love letter to Lang Nyat Nyo. When the teacher asked if he regretted it, Lucam Duong firmly said that he didn't have any regrets. She suddenly drifted into a memory. In the middle of our senior year, Tan Duat, you also got caught breaking the rules and were sent to the supervisor's office to write a self-reflection. At the end, you even wrote that you would try to change to bring happiness to Nhan Tin. That self-reflection paper became famous throughout the school. Even the 10th graders knew about it. Quach Phuong recounted the story with a lightness that made it seem like she was reminiscing about an old classmate, rather than the man who had shared her bed for the past 3 years. Tan Duat, of course, remembered the incident very clearly. Nhan Tin didn't speak to him for a week because of it. She was worried the teachers would think she was neglecting her studies due to a premature romantic relationship. In the impulsiveness of youth, one can do many reckless things for the person they like without caring about the consequences. The movie soundtrack began playing. Quach Phuong and Tan Duat remained silent. The theater was dark, and only the flickering light from the screen, with its intensity constantly changing with each scene, illuminated the room. As Quach Phuong watched the young couple Lucam Duong and Lang Nyat Nyo in the movie, she couldn't help but be reminded of the past. This Lang Nyat Nyo indeed resembled her in many ways. It was 10 years ago when Quach Phuong first met Tan Duat. That year, Quach Phuong, thanks to her excellent entrance exam results, easily got into the city's top high school and even received a full scholarship. In her entire life, her academic achievements were her only pride. In other areas, she felt that she was always at a loss. But then she thought that if she hadn't done so well on her exams at that time, she might have gone to a different school. In that case, Quach Phuong would never have had the chance to meet Tan Duat, and she wouldn't have loved him for 10 years. At 15, Quach Phuong studied in the same school and the same class as Tan Duat. What was even worse was that she ended up being his deskmate. Initially, Tan Duat was just like any other rich kid who used his privileged position to act out without any regard for rules. Tan Duat wasn't good at studying. Out of the 6 school days in a week, he only attended class for 3. His grades were at the bottom of the barrel. Then, she heard rumors that Tan Duat had used the back door to get into the school, which only worsened her impression of him. What she despised the most were people who relied on their higher starting points to be lazy and irresponsible. But deep down, Quach Phuong wished that she could be like Tan Duat one day, free to do as she pleased without having to worry about what others thought. That was why she worked so hard, harder than anyone else.